27th of November 2010. On one of the internet forums where users from Russia discussed wilderness survival, a user under the nickname Igor writes that he is currently alone in the Siberian forest with almost no supplies and no tent, and that he needs a survival guide. Users try to help him, but then he suddenly disappears. Most people assumed that it was a joke, but unfortunately the author of this post was a real person. In this video, I will tell you about Igor Grudcinov case. Igor Grudcinov was born in 1990 in the western part of Russia in the city of Belgorod. He was into computers and excelled in exact sciences, although he wasn't a so-called nerd. He had plenty of friends and social interactions. After school, Igor entered the University of Oil and Gas in Moscow, where he moved to study. In the university during his first year, he met a girl named Nastya, and they started dating. Their relationship was serious from the very beginning, and Igor wanted to marry Nastya. They even managed to introduce each other to their parents. Igor constantly told all of his friends that he wanted to marry his girlfriend. But by the fourth year of their studies in university, their relationship cooled down and Nastya got a new boyfriend. She started dating another Igor, whom she met in the university. In addition to this, Igor found out that he has some health issues with his heart. And because of breaking up with Nastya, he started having some problems with his studies. Even before that, he always felt that although he was studying a lot, his grades were worse than he deserved, as he thought. Also, it is likely that during a breakup with Nastya, she told Igor that she doesn't consider him to be a real man. We can assert this because in conversation with his friends, Igor told them that he wants to prove Nastya that he's a real man, and he was repeating it over and over again, so he was kind of obsessed with this. And because of it, for some reason, Igor slowly became fascinated with the theme of wilderness survival. He decided to explore this topic through various TV shows such as Bear Grylls' show, probably not realizing that most of such shows are staged. At one point, he asked his friend Kostya Soldatov to keep a saw and axe and a shovel handle in his dorm room. Kostya naturally became curious about why Igor needed all of this. Igor told him that he found a way to prove to Nastya that he was a real man. He decided to choose a random location by literally pointing to it on an online map and then go there with a tent and supplies to spend some time alone, surviving. He believed that this would show Nastya that he is the kind of man she needs, and he randomly clicked on the place not far from the small town in Siberia, in the Novosibirsk region. The small town was called Kargat. After listening to his plan, Kostya became interested and decided to join Igor, and Igor agreed. So they started planning their trip together. The main problem they saw was getting to the town of Kargat, as it was thousands of kilometers away from Moscow. The preparation process of Igor and Kostya left much to be desired. However, their main problem was that they were studying survival through various TV shows. And also their plan was to head to Siberia in November, which is, as you understand, is a very bad idea. In these regions, November is considered autumn only formally. Besides the fact that temperatures often drop to -20 or even -30 degrees Celsius, there are also fierce penetrating winds that make it incredibly difficult to hide from. Igor and Kostya really didn't understand where they were going. They even decided to take a fishing rod with them. That is useless in Siberia at this time of the year. In late November of 2010, taking with them some equipment and supplies, along with a small amount of money and their mobile phones, Igor and Kostya boarded a long-distance train from Moscow to Khabarovsk. They planned to get off at the Kargat station, precisely where Igor had accidentally pointed on the map. After 2 days on the train, they finally arrived there. Because of the size of Russia, spending 2, 3 or 5 days in the train is normal if you want to move from the west to the eastern part of country. It was the morning of November 27th, 2010, and after they left the train, they were slowly realizing that November in Siberia is very far from warm. And also the Kargat station turned out to be very small. It is surrounded by a small town, which is more similar to a village, and also forests everywhere. However, Igor was not willing to deviate from his plan, and he was determined to prove to Nastya that he was a real man. By this point, Kostya had started expressing doubts about the wisdom of their plan, but ultimately he agreed with Igor, and together with their backpacks, they headed into the depths of the forest. But sometimes their paths followed alongside the highway as they headed towards Lake Kargat. At this point, the temperature was approximately -10 degrees Celsius. And despite the fact that Igor and Kostya wore winter jackets, they were not suited for such temperatures. And also, as for the footwear, they wore mid-season boots, which were probably fine to wear in the central part of Russia, but they were not suited for Siberian forests, especially in November. By 4 o'clock it was getting dark, and Igor decided to set up a small camp and light a fire. At this moment they have already covered 24 kilometers by foot. They chose a spot in the forest and decided to set up a camp there. Although Igor could still hear the noise of the highway in the distance, and he was disappointed that they hadn't ventured deeper into the forest because he considered having a road nearby as a temptation to go back. Unsurprisingly, as it got darker, the temperature dropped to -20 degrees, and Kostya began to doubt whether his and Igor's hike was a good idea. He believed that it was too cold and windy and began suggesting either returning or searching for another campsite. Igor stood his ground and had no intention of leaving. He wanted to set up improvised tent and make a fire right there. Maybe because many of his acquaintances and classmates knew about his hike, he considered it shameful to simply give up. Besides, he still wanted to prove to Nastya his manliness. Kostya continued to insist that they should go back home, and they started arguing, and at some point Igor simply decided to start ignoring Kostya completely. After it, Kostya decided to head back. He walked alone for 5 hours back to the train station, where he called his mother and asked her to transfer money for his return ticket. His mother didn't believe that her son was in Siberia, but she still sent the money. Kostya tried calling Igor again, but couldn't reach him, so he waited for his train and left. At the time, Igor was left alone. It was already dark and the cold wind was becoming unbearable. By some miracle, he managed to get a mobile network signal and access to the internet on his phone. He decided not to call for help, but instead went to a specialized forum for so-called hermits, where people discussed survival in the wilderness, among other topics. He created a discussion thread titled, "Urgent, help me survive." In this post he wrote, "I'm standing by the fire and writing this. Please help. I'm in the forest. The temperature is around -20 degrees. I built a makeshift shelter, hoping to warm it from the inside, but there was too much smoke. I moved the fire about a meter away from the shelter and covered it with a tarp, but there was still too much smoke. What kind of shelter or accommodation can I make so I don't freeze to death? There are only birch trees around, knee-deep snow, and my tools are an axe, knife, saw, and a shovel. Please help." The first comment left on this thread advised Igor to simply go back, considering it would be difficult for him to survive the night in the forest. Igor responded, "I don't consider that option. It's either survive here or die here. I know I'm an idiot, a fool, etc. I can't go back. I'm 3,000 kilometers away from my usual location. It's already dark here, and getting out on my own doesn't seem possible. But the main thing is that I don't want to. How do you survive the night and not freeze? Please explain better." So probably Igor was fully aware that he might die, but he was willing to risk it. Then users, unsure if the author of this thread was telling the truth, began trying to help him nonetheless. A user under the nickname Jane wrote, "In our cold regions, the first thing to do is to build a stove. I know that you can heat a tent shelter with a kerosene lamp, but I'm curious how you ended up going into the woods and starting to build in such cold weather. Unless, of course, it's some kind of joke. Without shelter and food supplies, it's suicide." In response, Igor said, "Perhaps it's suicide, but if it were, I wouldn't be writing. I do have food supplies, and this is not a joke. Building a stove is good, but it's impossible right now. I've read the entire forum, but apparently I missed something somewhere. Specifically, what type of shelter would be best for me?" The messaging between Igor and internet users continued for some time. Some people were sharing survival guides with him, posting illustrations. Others didn't believe that he was telling the truth. Igor also complained that his fire was too smoky, so he couldn't hide it under the tent. And he also said that his feet got wet and he didn't know how to dry them. After a few hours, Igor wrote his last message in response to one of the users. He said, "I have polyethylene," and asked, "Will it work as an airtight material?" and disappeared. 2 days later, Igor's friends and relatives started worrying about his fate. At first, one of Igor's friends called Kostya and started asking what happened to him. Then Igor's mother, when she found out what her son did, started calling Kostya. But at this moment, none of them knew that Igor was asking for help on the internet forums. As well as people on the forum still didn't know was the story true or not. Igor's mother and friend contacted the police in Kargat, and the search began. What may seem strange is that the search was short-lived. On the first day, it lasted only 4 hours. Several people on snowmobiles participated in the search. However, no traces of Igor were found at the place where he was last seen. He was considered missing. Police may have returned to the place just a couple of times, and then the search ended. Some people speculated that Igor knew what he was getting into and that his entire plan was an attempt to intentionally end his life. There were also suggestions that Igor was attacked by wild animals, or since nothing was found, some speculated that he might have gone to the highway and hitchhiked a ride to somewhere else, or perhaps he fell victim to an attack by an unknown person. Igor's mother desperately tried to find her son. She visited the forest where Kostya last saw him and called out to him in despair. She even reached out to psychics and various TV shows, but it was all in vain. Some internet users even suspected that Kostya might be involved in Igor's disappearance, considering that, according to his words, they had a conflict in the forest, and also because he didn't immediately report it to the police. Months passed, and there was no information about Igor, until almost exactly a year after his disappearance, a hunter walking through the forest with his dog found a poorly constructed shelter made of branches and polyethylene. Nearby, he initially thought he saw the body of an animal, but upon closer inspection he realized that it was a human. The arriving police immediately recognized it as the body of Igor Grudcinov. Igor's body was partially skeletonized and partially mummified. He was in the fetal position, which typically corresponds to people who freeze to death in their sleep. The tent was very close to the place where Kostya said goodbye to Igor, and it became unclear how the search teams working in that area a year ago couldn't find him. The decomposition of the body that was lying in the forest, possibly through spring, summer and fall, was so advanced that the cause of death couldn't be determined with certainty. But the police still didn't consider other versions, except that Igor just froze to death. However, it is still strange how the search group didn't find him a couple of days after he disappeared. And also why he didn't just go to the highway that was audible in the distance when he realized that he cannot build a normal tent and just ask for help from drivers. And it is also not even known for sure how many days Igor spent in the forest before he died. Most likely he died on the first night, but there is possibility that he could have spent more time in the forest. Only when the first news about the discovery of Igor's body began to appear did people on the forum where he asked for help on that fateful night start leaving comments, realizing that it was indeed Igor. Many internet users mocked him. Others still, to this day, are not sure about the official version, believing that there are inconsistencies in this story. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.